We all know Monkey D. Luffy from One Piece as one of the most honorable, reliable, and genuinely noble characters in anime. He stood up to and defeated overwhelmingly powerful enemies, and if you're caught up with the series, you see just how far his power and influence continues to grow. But I think the real question isn't how strong Luffy is, it's why Luffy is the way he is at all. Like, what actually makes him different from everyone else? Why is he the one who can charge headfirst into impossible situations and somehow change the world around him? Why wasn't anyone able to do it before? And before I go any further, I'm putting a spoiler warning right here. This covers the post-war arc and beyond. If you're not caught up, go watch it and come back to this video. Now that that's out of the way, let's get started. Obviously, on the surface, Luffy has the traits you'd expect of a heroic protagonist: a noble heart, a strong sense of loyalty, a desire for freedom, and willingness to help others. Those qualities do support his dream of becoming king of the pirates, but that doesn't really explain why he takes things so much further than everyone else. When we look at his upbringing, it doesn't fully answer the question. He wasn't raised by his parents. He grew up with bandits under Curly the Don. His grandfather was inconsistent and pretty harsh. None of these influences really clearly explain his extreme mindset. They shaped parts of him, sure, but they didn't give him his determination, his follow-through. They give him a standard to follow. And yeah, I know he's the main character of the story, so of course he's going to be the one to invoke change in the story. But in universe, we can't really identify the reason why he's the one to shift the world. Other characters in One Piece have clear, traceable reasons for who they become. Zoro is driven by a promise to his friend. Chopper is shaped by his mentorship from Dr. Hiruluk. And even Nico Robin is defined by trauma and survival and the culture of our own people. Even in other shows, we see why characters push themselves past their limits and why they break certain rules. Like in Naruto. Naruto clearly reflects his influences. Mentors like Iruka Sensei, Kakashi, Jiraiya, they shaped who Naruto eventually became. They not only trained him to help him push past his limits, but they looked past the monster inside him and accepted him for who he was. So he wanted to help his friends stay safe with the power he had. We don't just see anyone put into that situation and then magically come out with the personality and journey of Naruto, because we see the opposite effect in Gaara. Gaara was in the exact same type of situation Naruto was, but he didn't have any of those influences, and that's how Gaara ended up ruthless until Naruto passed on those morals and kindness, and then we see Gaara invoke his own type of change within his village and eventually in other parts of the series. But with Luffy, the explanation feels a little incomplete. Now, you can argue that he inherits these traits from Dragon and Garp. They both possess ironclad moral compasses and relentless determination for their goals. But that's not necessarily consistent throughout the rest of the world. If we take Doflamingo, for instance, he's probably the most extreme counterexample, right? Despite being raised by kind and humble parents, he was already a diabolical force long before the world turned against him and his family. I'm not saying people have to be influenced the same way, but it's hard to justify saying one character naturally inherits an entire personality from parents who weren't even there, while another with present parents turns out to be the exact opposite of their parents. Now, I know I'm implying Luffy is somehow different, but fundamentally, he's not really that off from other characters. Plenty of other characters care about their friends, chase big dreams, and even want the One Piece. But where Luffy does differ, he just does things others simply won't. He punches a celestial dragon without hesitation. He declares war on the world government. He walks into situations where defeat seems almost guaranteed. Yes, Luffy is brave, but there are plenty of other brave characters. It's just that Luffy doesn't even recognize the limits that stop other people. Other pirates may hate the system, but they still acknowledge it. They work within it. They understand power, hierarchies, consequences, and fear. Luffy just doesn't. To him, a king, a god, or even a world noble is just another person. And he might see you as a good or bad person, no matter who you are. If they're wrong, he'll oppose them. No calculation, no hesitation. He doesn't accept any constraint, no matter how logical it might be. Yes, the Revolutionary Army fights against corruption and helps others, but Luffy does these things just as a part of his own journey towards the One Piece. It's not really his mission to take down the world government. It's not really his mission to help others. He literally just does it because it's on his path to the One Piece, because other people are nice to him. But again, my question is, where does he get this determination? Where does he get the ability to jump in things without fear? Again, Shanks showed him what kind of pirate to be. Garp hardened him, and Ace and Sabo gave him emotional grounding. But none of those explain the lack of internal conflict, the lack of fear, and the willingness to oppose any unjust institution simply because he doesn't like it. Most characters might struggle between their fears and their ambition, their morality and survival, their own loyalty and their own self-interest. Luffy doesn't struggle with any of those things. What he believes is right, he acts on immediately, even if he doesn't have the power to properly fight against it at first. He didn't learn these things, he just does it, or at least he didn't seem to learn these things. That kind of consistency isn't normal, even in the world of One Piece. Now, as we move on to Wano and see things like Gear 5, and we learn about Joy Boy in Egghead and Wano, we could easily just break it down to destiny, especially with the Will of D, the truth behind his devil fruit, and his growing connection to larger world events. And we can just say Luffy is just meant to do this. He's prophesized to do this. And if he is, I think we have to ask the question, is his will his own? Or is his path predestined? Or is his will the will of maybe a past life? But I think if we look at the entire story as a whole, then it's less that Luffy is prophesized to do this and more like he's the one to fulfill the prophecy, if that makes sense. Can anyone accomplish what Luffy has accomplished if they just act more like Luffy? If we were to replace Luffy with any other character, could they truly replicate his unique journey and ironclad determination and develop his personality, or does it solely have to be Luffy put into this position at these places, at these moments, meeting these people? If it's the latter, I think we're left with something interesting. Luffy is clearly just different, but not in a way the story fully explains through upbringing, influence, or typical character development. He has a complete instinctive moral compass, no recognition of imposed authority, no hesitation or internal contradiction, and while we can describe these traits, we can't fully explain why he has them to this extreme degree. That missing piece might be revealed to us once we find out more about the Will of D and the D clan, or just when we find out more about Luffy, just something we might not already know. Or maybe there isn't really a missing piece. Maybe he just operates on a completely different understanding of the world. And ultimately, it's completely possible that a direct influence simply isn't necessary. Even in our own world, we can identify countless individuals who just think differently. The first dominoes, who are instinctively willing to defy the status quo and step out of line just because. We usually associate things like that with natural talent. We analyze who they are, their past, their interests, we break them down, we compare them to others, but at the end of the day, there's just something different about them that just isn't fully defined, and I think you can apply that to Luffy, and maybe that's the point.